So good evening, everyone. Bonjour à tous. Thank you for joining us for this virtual budget consultation session for Ward 13. Je m'appelle Rawlson King. I'm Rawlson King, City Councillor for Rideau-Rockcliffe, and I'm pleased to provide an opportunity where residents can provide input before the 2024 draft budget is tabled on November 8th and provide comment on the city's spending priorities and where to find potential savings. Though this meeting is being held remotely through Zoom and we're meeting virtually, the land on which Ottawa is built upon is unceded Algonquin-Anishinaabe territory. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that the peoples of the Algonquin-Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. The City of Ottawa honors the people and the land of the Algonquin-Anishinaabe Nation, and the City of Ottawa honors all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. Before we begin, here are a few housekeeping items. Please note that we will be recording this session and we'll post it on my office's YouTube channel. If you don't want to appear on video, we invite you to turn off your video and to utilize the chat function if you want to ask questions off screen. Please place your microphone on mute until a moderator invites you to ask your question. And to see the person who's speaking, select speaker view instead of gallery view. We're pleased this evening to be joined by Isabelle Jasmine, the Deputy City Treasurer for Corporate Finance at the City of Ottawa, and she'll now be providing a presentation on the budget process.
Thank you, Councillor. You could display the presentation.
Just one moment, Isabelle.
No worries. Sorry. Just took over my whole screen. Okay. All right, so good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending today's public consultation on the city's 2024 draft budget. My name is Isabelle Jasmine, Deputy City Treasurer, Corporate Finance. Je suis trésorière adjointe de Finances municipales. Next slide. So when planning today's session, we had one goal in mind: help our residents better understand and become more engaged in the city's budget. We hope the information from today's presentation helps everyone here have more meaningful discussions with your community members and your ward councillor on the city's 2024 draft budget. Immediately following last year's budget, our staff consulted with every councillor and our residents in order to get feedback and suggestions for improvement on the city's budget process. Over the past several months, we have been working very closely with the Mayor's office to incorporate the input we've received and seek new and improved ways to increase overall engagement and interest in the city's budget process, make budget information easier to access, provide the information to residents they care most about, make budget information easier to understand, increase the overall budget literacy. Today's presentation is broken down into three sections: municipal budget basics, budget process and development, and then we'll have a time at the end for questions on the process if you have any. Today's presentation will not touch on any specific details on the city's 2024 draft budget. Those will be released when the budget is tabled on November 8th. Next slide. So in this section, we will cover the requirement for the city to have a balanced budget under the Municipal Act and what that means, the differences between an operating and a capital budget, what the funding sources are for the operating and capital budgets, the city's various budgets and tax levies, and user fees and charges. Next slide. Every year, the City of Ottawa produces a municipal budget. One of the most important documents. The budget is the blueprint that defines how resources are collected and allocated. The budget is made up of two main components: the operating budget and the capital budget. The Ontario Municipal Act provides rules for municipalities to prepare their budgets. By law, municipalities cannot have an operating deficit. The Act requires all municipalities to balance their budget each year. This means that expenditures must equal revenues. or simply put, money out must be equal to the money coming in when building and adopting the overall budget. To balance the budget, the city can either increase its revenues using tools such as property taxes and fees, or through managing expenses through efficiencies and continuous improvements to continue to focus on providing services for value for money. Next slide. The operating budget covers the ongoing day-to-day expenses that the municipality incurs to provide programs and services to residents, including items such as staff salaries, emergency services such as fire, paramedics, and bylaw, recreation programs, facilities maintenance, winter operations, and utilities, to list just a few examples. The capital budget plans for the acquisition and replacement of tangible capital assets, which are defined as significant expenditures to provide municipal services with a benefit beyond 1 year. The capital budget excludes the costs of operating these services, which form part of the operating budget. The capital budget is developed in accordance with the council-approved official plan, the transportation master plan, the infrastructure master plan, development charges background study, and the various long-range financial plans. It covers long-term investments such as road paving and resurfacing, sidewalks, investments in new facilities, and investments to maintain existing facilities, bridges, parks infrastructure, water treatment plants, pumping stations, water and wastewater and storm infrastructure, such as underground pipes, and traffic control devices and pedestrian crossings, to list a few examples. Next slide. Operating budget funding sources include annual property taxes, which is broken out as the citywide levy, the transit levy, and police levy, each funding those individual services. User fees and charges such as water utility fees, assessment growth related to revenues, provincial and federal funding, payments in lieu of taxes that come from government buildings, investment income, and dividends. Capital budget funding sources include the annual property taxes, citywide levy, the transit levy, and police levy, development charges from developers, federal and provincial funding in the form of grants, debt. In Ontario, municipalities issue long-term debt to fund capital projects. However, as part of the Municipal Act, they may not commit more than 25% of total own source revenue to service the long-term debt and other long-term obligations. The City of Ottawa's fiscal framework further limits this debt level to 7.5%. Water utility fees rates supported by infrastructure, water, wastewater, and stormwater. Next slide. So the city has four major budget categories or groupings. The first three on this slide, which is tax supported, transit, and police, are each funded through their own separate tax, each with their own tax levy. The fourth, rate supported, is funded through water utility charges. I will explain each of these in detail on the next few slides. Next slide. So the majority of the city programs and services are funded by annual property taxes. These programs are referred to as tax-supported services and are funded by the citywide tax levy on the property tax bill. Property taxes are the largest single source of revenue for the city and represents approximately 46% of the annual revenue. Examples of tax-supported programs or services include roads and winter maintenance, parks, recreation, facility services and programs, libraries, public health, paramedics, community and social services, fire services, Office of the Auditor General. It is important to note that some tax-supported programs receive provincial funding. For example, public health receives 75%. And public health gets 75% in the province, 25% city. Paramedics, 50% province, 50% city. And community and social services has a variety of different funding percentages. Next slide. So the budget for the city's transit services is funded through a separate tax on the property tax bill, the transit levy. The transit levy is its own separate tax stream. The city's fiscal framework recommends transit fares recover 55% and remaining 45% transit tax levy. However, that is not the case today. Fares only cover 39% of operating costs. Transit Services receives federal and provincial funding through the provincial and federal gas tax. And the city's transit services fall under the authority of the Transit Commission and include services provided by OC Transpo, Paratranspo, and the city's LRT. The police services budget. The budget for the city's police services is funded through a separate tax on the property tax bill, the police levy. The police levy is its own separate tax stream on the property tax bill. The Ottawa Police Services falls under the authority of the Police Services Board. Next slide. The city's water, wastewater, and stormwater services are funded through a separate user fee charged to residents on their bi-monthly water utility bill or as a fee on the property tax bill. These program services are referred to as the rate-supported services. Example of rate-supported programs include drinking water purification, delivery of clean water to residents and businesses, collection and treatment of wastewater, stormwater management, water meter installation and life cycle. The budget for the city's rate-supported services falls under the authority of the Environment and Climate Change Committee and is directed by the council-approved rate long-range financial plan. Next slide. The Municipal Act allows municipalities to impose fees and charges to cover the cost of delivering services in their jurisdiction. Revenues from the fee are used to offset the cost of providing the good or service. The Municipal Act prescribes the various areas that fees, charges can be imposed. Examples of user fees and charges include transit fares, recreation program fees, facility arena rentals, building permits, parking permits, and water utility fees. Next slide. So now I'll move on to the budget process and development. To recap, we covered budget basics, and now we will delve into the budget process and how the budget is developed, the committee structure and budget books, 2024 budget enhancements, the term of council priorities, and the 2024 budget council and committee meeting schedule. Next slide. So the budget process. Beginning with the budget process itself, I would like to reiterate that the budget is a year-round process, and we will go over the budget directions, public engagement, and budget tabling and adoption. Next slide. The budget directions. The budget cycle formally kicks off with the council-approved budget directions. For the 2024 budget, this was approved by council on September 13th. The budget directions report identifies the approach and timetable, plus the upper limit tax increases to the citywide police services and transit tax levies. In addition, it identifies the guiding principles and fiscal framework to develop the budget that includes, but not limited to, forecasting revenues, determining the rate program increases and changes to user fees and charges. Next slide. In terms of public engagement, another key component of the budget process is public engagement. Opportunities for residents to share feedback are contacting one's ward councillor, online engagement via Engage Ottawa, and councillor-led public consultations like today. And new this year, there will be enhanced social media posts, electronic advertisements at city facilities, and promotional video of how to engage on the city budget. This video will be provided to councillors for promotion. Next slide. The budget tabling and adoption. The city's draft budget is tabled at council. The city's budget is broken down into a series of budgets organized by each of these standing committees, and each committee is forwarded their draft budget for review. Each standing committee reviews the draft, operating, and capital budgets for the city program services departments under their mandate, and then makes recommendations regarding their draft budgets, which are forwarded to council for consideration. After all standing committees have reviewed and made recommendations regarding their draft budgets, council reviews all budget recommendations at the same time. After council has reviewed and voted on all the committee budget recommendations, the city's final budget is adopted. Next slide. So in terms of the committee structure and the budget book structure, each city service area reports to a standing committee. The budget books are organized by standing committee and include the detailed budget information for the various city program services under the purview and mandate of each committee. Slide. In terms of budget enhancements were based on the feedback since 2023 budget. The goal of these enhancements is to improve budget literacy and improve engagement by removing barriers to participate. Enhancements are listed on the slide, but of note, some enhancements are today's technical briefing, introducing a new 2024 draft budget tool, plus enhanced reporting and online content. Ultimately, we are looking to create an understanding of the investments being made across our services and programs that serve our community. Next slide. The term of council priorities. The 2024 draft budget will ensure and highlight its alignment with the term of council priorities that are seen on this slide. A city that has affordable housing and is more livable for all. A city that is more connected with reliable, safe, and accessible mobility options. A city that is green and resilient. And a city with a diversified and prosperous economy. Next slide. And so this slide highlights each of the committee meetings, all the standing committee meetings throughout the month of November after the budget is tabled. This is the schedule for each of the committees. Delegates are invited to speak at these committee meetings. And the schedule is on our website. And if there's any changes made, it is made automatically to that website. So if you want to see the most current date for the committee meeting that you would be interested in, please visit our website. And that's it for me. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Isabel, for that really in-depth report. I know that council and members of council in the last months after the first transitional budget did instruct staff to really reach out before to residents, as well as to try to simplify the messaging. And I think that we've established a good approach with the technical briefing that was given to councillors, as well as frankly this outreach here. So we have a few questions for you. So we'll start with Peter first. And I think you have to unmute, Peter.
Thank you. It's not obvious. I don't see where the arts funding is in the committee's list. It's not obvious here where that is in this list.
Arts funding, I believe, is in the community and recreation services budget.
Okay, it'd be good to make it more obvious. I know it's, what is that in title, but okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. No, it is. Yeah, there's a lot of line items on the budget. So yeah, and it does roll up to a committee somewhere. Yes. And
so we would invite you, Peter, once the budget is tabled on November 8th to go to the website, ottawa.ca, under budget, and all those line items will be listed at that time once the budget is tabled. So the next question comes from Mr. New Rundon. And I see that your hand is still raised. If you want to ask the question, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. I was struggling with, unmuting myself. Yeah. Okay, my name is Nurdin Busenje. I'm a resident in Vanier. Thank you so much for educating us about the budget processes. But I'm wondering, the budget is going to be tabled on 8th November. For us as young people, this is really a short time. What I know with the budget, like once it's tabled, it's really difficult, to include or change a few things. We needed to have consultations with the young people to know their priorities in terms of budget, like the gentleman said earlier, we didn't see any statement that shows, this is the amount of money for youth participation and engagement. We needed to see that, separate and listed, and we needed to know what are the budget priorities of young people? And it is such a short time. So I don't really know, you really guide us if we have time where we can, share our views and inputs in the budget before it's tabled for adoption. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for the comment and the question. We just want you to know that what we try to do is we try to be responsive throughout the whole year as we hear concerns from the community to ensure that we pass those concerns on. I think you'll be happy to know that I'm working with my colleague in Rideau-Vanier with Councillor Stephanie Plante on initiatives around a greater recognition for children and youth. And so we're continuing to work with our colleagues and with the mayor on a process that might eventually see the city designated as a child-friendly city. So we started some of that work last term, but we want to continue on in that work. And we want to ensure that we enhance investments around youth, especially in high priority neighborhoods. So some of that work goes beyond social services into the parks and recreation budget. Looking at the renovations of field houses and also investing in our parks. So these are ongoing conversations, but we do invite you to provide comment at any time to our offices. And we also really are encouraging, especially youth, to be involved in the budget process. The budget process is structured in a way where over the course of a month, we do undertake consultation and deliberation at committees after the budget is tabled. But we want to ensure that we have that continuing dialogue, especially with youth, who frankly are quite important to the process. So we just want you to know that that is being undertaken, and we're happy to follow up with you about specific concerns and where investments should go. And I see that Natalie has raised her hand.
Here we go. Hi. And maybe the city staffer is better to answer this question, but why is it that the council caps the rate increase before knowing what the actual delivery cost of all of the services and costs to run and maintain the city are? I mean, when we have inflation that's far more than 2.5%, it just seems like we can't have even the poor service that we had on many things like road maintenance or snow removal without having much more of a rate increase. So I don't get how that's the decision path of the city. Can somebody explain why that happens that way to me?
So I can say that historically it's been the direction from council. So the mayor you made commitments also to keep tax rates as low as possible. We've provided that as part of the direction report so that we go away and we look at how do we stay within that level. And so it's looking for efficiencies throughout as at the same time. And so it's just keeping tax rates manageable and keeping a sharp eye to figure out how do we deliver those services within those targets. But it is a direction from council.
Yeah. So I can chime in here as well. I mean, if you're looking for the political commentary, there are a number of councillors who do agree that we should do it the opposite way around. We should actually make assessments as to what we need and then look at a cap. Now, this is a historical development, and frankly, our previous mayor said that before amalgamation, at the pre-amalgamated city of Ottawa, they would just get massive tax increases. So it was his innovation to set direction. I obviously don't agree with that, but that is the prevailing approach. I went on record about not agreeing with that and politically, obviously, opposing the 2.5% direction with all the political reasons that you had outlined. I think with inflation, as well as the other challenges that are confronting the city, we actually need to make an assessment first before. However, this has been the direction of council, and so staff will just follow the approved direction.
It's a big lie to taxpayers, honestly. I mean, yes, we have very high taxes compared to other cities, but we don't have a very big commercial base to offset some of our residential tax burden. But that's just the reality of living in Ottawa. And I just feel like we don't really understand what it costs to run the city. We just have these artificial numbers that get proposed. Anyway, wanted to chime in on that opinion.
Well, politically, I understand where you're coming from. The key here as well is to have a good dialogue to understand what residents' concerns are, where residents think there should be investments, so that when we do enter into the deliberation stage, if there are extra dollars that can be allocated, we would look at that. I also say that the new mayor has committed to the idea that dollars can be fluid and mobile. So just because we are working within that 2.5% bracket, it doesn't mean that every area has to be increased. And so dollars could shift based on the changing math of what might need to be applied. So that's actually, I think, also important to note, and that's why it's important to have this conversation, because there can be dollars that can be found. Though I would admit it's a hard task with the amount of services that are generally mandated, and the fact that the budget needs to be balanced, and that we need to continue to provide ongoing services in many areas. So oh, sorry, I don't know if you're on mute, Natalie.
There we go. Sorry about that. We're not improving transit. We're not increasing the efficiency of it. We're not putting more money in it to get the ridership up. We're just talking about raising fees. And, unless we provide a good system, people just won't take it. And so the city has to suck it up and pay for that to get people to get riding the transit system, or else they just never will, because we'll always have this lame transit system that doesn't really get people to where they want to go in a timely fashion.
And I agree with you in terms of the issues around reliability and the proper funding of the system. So I actually had released a full white paper on transit optimization just a little while ago, talking about the challenges around proper funding, around the need for reliability, especially for our bus network in Rideau-Rockcliffe. So we're going to have that, debate around the table.
Just asking citizens what they want, well, they're all going to tell you that they don't want to raise taxes, because why wouldn't you say that? So
that's part two. So this part of the discussion is really about the process, but we actually did ask, we did a small survey. It's not a scientific survey. We'll get to that after this set of questions. But interestingly enough, the raising, controlling the escalation of taxes was not the highest priority from the people who responded to our survey, even if it was a small amount of people. Yeah. So it is interesting. So we will definitely get to that, but I hear you on that. I know that Danica has been holding on for a while.
Okay. Yeah. I also just asked the question in the chat, but mostly I guess my questions are broader. I'd like to hear, and maybe this is part of the agenda for today, but I guess I'd like to hear your impressions, Rawlson. I feel like I've attended a million of these consultations and I'm still confused as to the process, but you've seen the budget. And so can
No,
you?
so what, we haven't seen the
Oh.
budget yet. What we want to do is we
Okay.
want to ensure that we, so that will be tabled on November 8th, and that's when everybody
okay.
will get to see the budget. What we're doing here is asking you what you'd like to see in the budget, so that when I'm around the council table and the committee tables, because I try to go to every meeting and ask questions that really reflect what residents' concerns are, and also deliberate with my colleagues as to where investments should be made. We feel that it's important for us to have a good sense of what residents want. So that's the reason why we're having it here. We're having the consultation right now. So we have Isabel here to explain the process. And so on November 8th, it will be tabled, and everybody will see it, both the public and all members of council. And then we will deliberate as to whether the numbers and the investments are appropriate. And so it's important for us to hold this session so that we get a sense of what your priorities are. So step one is really just a description of the process here, and listening to you, and then moving forward at committee and council with pursuing the investments that we want.
Okay.
Okay, next question. So I think it's Joni. Oh,
Okay, great. Thank you.
okay.
Yes, back in February when you did initial budget, another budget consultation, I attended and I asked about the culture master plan, which you didn't seem to really know what I was talking about at the time, and sort of later directed me somewhere else to look for it. And I couldn't find out any current information on it. So I was wondering what the city's priority was in having that be started up again. The next.
So the good news is that we took notes, and then we started to have discussions with people in charge of the cultural unit. And you're right, the plan has elapsed. And what I'll be doing is I'll be working with my colleagues to see if we can direct staff to undertake a new plan. There's also cultural groups that are advocates who are advocating for obviously greater investment in arts and culture, and the potential renewal of the plan. So I just want you to know that that is on our radar. That doesn't have to be done under the scope of the budget itself, but that would be something that would need to come to Community Services Committee, and I sit on Community Services Committee, and I have a great interest actually in arts and culture as well. So I don't have a problem continuing to do a little bit more research with staff, and then bringing a direction, because I also would agree that it's time for renewal.
Great, thank you very much.
Absolutely. So I see one last hand is up.
Hi, Rawlson. Good evening, everyone.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Evening.
So I wasn't gonna speak up about this because I thought this was a general budget consultation as to how things work and whatnot. But since it's been brought up, as my counselor, I've mentioned before, what I would like our budget to be focusing on is, it was earlier mentioned, is safety of children. Traffic calming measures in our neighborhood, Manor Park East, especially on March Circle, despite being a circle. Saint Laurent calming measure seems to be working a bit better with the flexi stuff in the middle during the non-snow months. The roundabout that was approved ages ago near Manor Park Public School, it's a big problem. I know you know it. I know it's been approved, but it's so the traffic calming measures, that roundabout, and revitalization of Alvin Park. I know you're working on it. I know it's in your radar, but I wanted to emphasize, like, we have more and more families coming into our neighborhood. We have so many families with young children that these are really important to us. The traffic calming measures being one, and parks and that safety of that school. My kids don't go to that school, but that doesn't matter because most of our neighborhood children does go to that school. And it is really important for their safety, especially in winter months when cars are zooming and there's snowbanks and ice. So just wanted to bring that back up to your radar and tell you that that is what is really important to me and my immediate neighbors in my neighborhood, in my ward here.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate that. The fact of the matter is we do know that roundabout is at least on the infrastructure list, and that's one of the reasons why I'd like to see greater funding around infrastructure investments. It's one of the things I really focus on. If there is an infrastructure project, I make sure we never say no. We want to expedite those types of investments because they're very important. We hear complaints all the time around the traffic conditions around Manor Park School. And so, I think it's actually quite important that we make substantive, permanent changes in terms of traffic calming, so that we can actually address those challenges, because the temporary investments are not enough, and the park as well. So we're intent on having a real discussion to see how we can put real investment into Alvin Heights Park. All of these things are top of mind on the radar. The challenge, of course, is also the level of priority, because staff does create lists and prioritizes across the entire city. The challenge when we have a constrained number of dollars to spend each year is that we can't get to all of those priorities as quickly as we would want. But rest assured, we're always asking. We have annual meetings around infrastructure investments. We try to have quarterly meetings around park infrastructure, and we're always asking what dollars can we leverage and where can we make those investments. So I just want you to know that that's always top of mind, and we're going to continue to do that on your behalf. And that goes beyond the budget cycle. We're always advocating for more. So we just want you to know that in terms of Manor Park, and we're going to be happy to work with Natalie, with the community association, with the tenants union, with yourself, to really try to advance those projects. And I see Joni might have one last question before we go to my presentation.
Thanks. Sorry, yes, just switching gears to student safety. I did wonder what the investment was going to be for student busing, because as you may recall, my daughter, who is at Queen Elizabeth on Saint Laurent Boulevard in grade 8, has to take a city bus because there's not a school bus for her. And these OC Transpo schedule was such that she was late every single day for the first month and a half of school. And I had to advocate myself after asking OSTA, after asking the school board, and even, yourself, Councillor King, were not able to advocate for me. But in just pointing out simple math to OC Transpo that they were missing 2 routes, 2 buses in their morning route, causing the delay, they realized they were, and they added 2 buses in the morning, and my daughter hasn't been late for 2 weeks. Yeah. But the greater issue is the safety issue, as she's sitting at a bus stop waiting over an hour, and especially in the winter months, it's concerning. There's also an issue with her coming home from school. She often waits an hour on Saint Laurent Boulevard. After the school is closed, the staff is gone, and there's still students waiting for a bus home. So I think there is a need, even at a grade 8 age, for school buses, just for student safety. And I was wondering what kind of priority was being placed on that.
So we're going to continue to have discussions about reliability of service. OC Transpo is undertaking an optimization exercise, as you might know, to deal with, frankly, their $40 million deficit from the lack of ridership. So there's quite a hole in the budget, and I'll be very interested in seeing how they're going to attempt to address that, and whether we can make up the difference in terms of operating and both capital budgets. But I would agree with you, and that's one of the reasons why I think we were at least assisting. My office was assisting I guess the back and forth in terms of the dialogue with OC Transpo, because it's not acceptable, for your daughter to wait long periods of time, potentially in inclement weather as we move into winter, and to have buses not arrive. We've been having this problem, and I had released that in that white paper on bus optimization, in my estimation, since the strike we had years ago. And it's only been worse. And in Overbrook, as example, one of our neighborhoods, we have a high priority, a neighborhood with low income prevalence, where people have given up on taking the bus because it's not predictable. If they miss, one of the buses in our neighborhood, they have to wait another half hour, and it becomes not a credible option for them if they want to get to work on time. So a lot of people have given up, and they've been taking Uber, despite the fact that they can't afford Uber. So now this issue is compounded with our children and the challenges around the school bus provision. So we're gonna continue to follow up with staff. Their OC Transpo will release its plan concurrent with the budget. And we're going to examine that very carefully to ensure that the plan that they have still accommodates the needs of both residents going to work, residents just undertaking everyday errands, and especially our children going to school, because you're absolutely right. If we have this problem with OSTA, then the responsibility falls on to OC Transpo, and we need to ensure that the resourcing is there so that children can get to school, because it's already difficult. A lot of the routes are so difficult in our ward that a lot of kids just bike to school, older kids bike to school, because it's faster and more direct than the bus routes that we have. So I just want you to know we will be advocating, we will be discussing with OC Transpo when they do release their updated plan to ensure that the routes will accommodate the needs of residents, and especially students like your child.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So I'd like to just thank Isabel for the detailed presentation on process. And now I was going to move into an examination of our survey that our office undertook. A small response. It's not a scientific survey, but it will provide some information, at least at a general level, to everybody. And thank you, Aaron, for getting the presentation up. We can move to the next slide. So I just wanted to say a few words about the importance of public consultation, and really thank you for participating in this session tonight. Since in my estimation, participating in a municipal budget process is crucial for residents. Obviously, our budget priorities demonstrate what the city's priorities should be. And so it's important that we have residents providing us input around allocation of resources, As you know, the budget determines how public funds are allocated across various sectors such as transit, infrastructure, and social services. And active resident participation ensures that these resources are distributed equitably, addressing the community's diverse needs. We also need to prioritize communities' needs, and residents' input help identify and prioritize our local needs. By participating in consultations, residents can advocate for projects and programs that directly impact their quality of life, such as better roads, as we heard, better transit, and better parks, as we've just heard. It also allows for accountability and transparency. I think that engaging in the budget process promotes transparency and holds local authorities accountable for their financial decisions. You need to hold myself and council to account. Residents through the process can ask questions about expenditures, seek clarifications, and ensure that taxpayer money is being used efficiently and responsibly. And that can be done through, frankly, participating during the budget deliberations and making delegations if you have the opportunity before committees during budget time. I thought that it was also very important to have city staff here to provide a presentation because of the civic education element. So involvement in the budget process educates us as to how local governance and finance management works. And I think that's quite important because it can be very complex. A lot of people don't realize that, as an example, many of the services that we provide are mandated. And at the same time, we have to, by law, balance budgets. So it means that what's spent is finite, whether it's in operating and capital, but it's still important for people to understand the constraints as to how budget making is done in the city. It's also important for strengthening democracy. And so I think participation in local governance fosters a sense of ownership and pride in the community. When we share opportunities for people to make decisions, whether it's around parks, whether it's around active transportation infrastructure, I think then people feel more of a unity in terms of the community, and that their voice can truly be heard. Especially considering the nature of our neighborhood, I think it's important that public consultation provides advocacy for vulnerable populations, so that residents can advocate for funding for social programs, affordable housing, and other initiatives that support vulnerable populations. We need involvement from everyone, including people with lived experience. So that's very important to me. And frankly, within 2 days, we'll be holding another public consultation, primarily for the Indigenous, Black, and racialized communities, so their voice can be heard around the emerging anti-racism strategy. Economic development is also a very important component because a well-planned budget can also stimulate economic growth within the community. And long-term planning. The budget process often involves long-term planning, and by participating, residents can contribute to the development of longer-term strategies that shape the future of the community and ensure sustainable growth and development. So I'm really pleased that you're here today because participating in the budget process really is about empowerment, and that's what we want to do around local governance. Next slide. So we are pleased that we were able to undertake a budget survey that was online, that was circulated through our newsletter, and it's definitely non-scientific, and it was up for a number of weeks, and we had a reasonable amount of response over those couple weeks that it was up, but it gave us a sense of what people's priorities are, and what we found was that winter maintenance was top of mind, as well as road safety and renewal of sidewalks and pathways, reliability and affordability of transit was top of mind, as well as addressing climate change. In the next tier of concerns came affordable housing, affordable recreation, rising property taxes, and affordable childcare. Next slide. One of the questions that we asked were, are you actively engaged in the city's budget process? And this was not surprising. 35 of the 40 respondents that we've had so far to the survey had said that they're not. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to at least create this type of format for determining city budget priorities so that we could hear from you, and we could also ensure that people have a good understanding as to how the budget process works. Next slide. Which city service do you value the most or most concerned about and use on a regular basis? And this was not surprising as well. We saw that the majority of people were utilizing and concerned about transit, followed by parks, recreation and culture, community services, and then solid waste services or garbage collection, and emergency protective services such as paramedic services. Next slide. Which service is the most important in your opinion to receive additional funding? And by and far, we definitely heard that the focus should be on social and housing services. Since we have special requirements in this ward, that was not surprising in terms of area of focus, as well as transit services, followed by winter maintenance services and emergency and protective services. And one person focused on recreational services. And next slide. But I think what we've been hearing very clearly over the course of this term of council, being about 8 or 9 months in, is the idea of more traffic control and traffic calming, which I think was mentioned on this call, as well as reliable and affordable transit, more affordable housing, enhanced investments in social services, and repair and enhancement of road infrastructure. And I think that a lot of the comments that we heard in the first phase of this call really reflects that reality. And these are the priorities that I will be literally asking the mayor about in the next day or so, in terms of really pursuing these types of investments and substantive investments in these areas, because I believe that this really reflects what the ward wants us to focus on. So can we go to the next slide? So once again, I'm going to open it up for questions in terms of the areas of priority, or if there are any further questions that people would like to ask. But traffic calming, investments in affordable housing, investments in infrastructure, these are definitely key things that we hear all the time in our office, and are areas of focus that we will be pursuing during budget deliberations on your behalf. And I see Danica has raised her hands, and if there are any more comments on areas of focus that you would like us to really hone in on during budget deliberation, we're opening the floor to that, to hear your concerns and where you think our areas of focus should be.
Yeah, I don't think I have much to say that you haven't heard before, but I'll say it again anyways for the purpose of this exercise. But like there's crosswalks that we don't have, like at the twisty part on Coventry near the Saint Laurent Center. That's a long-term one. On Donald near Eve Street, like to access that park space. So just raising those two again, because I know, I don't know, I'm sure they're on your radar, but raising them again. And something that came up when we were trying to support the folks on Pressland who lived through that fire is that like we don't have a community health center here in either Vanier, which could help us, or Overbrook, which are neighborhoods that could use it, but whatever, like as is life, when the funding existed for these things, we didn't get it, and now we don't have one. But my understanding is that in other neighborhoods, there's a lot of social workers that work out of those spaces and are really able to do really, really solid outreach work into the community that we just don't have the capacity to do. And so, for example, when there was that fire, there was a lack of coordination and leadership, I would say. And it was a struggle to figure out how to like the administrative struggles prevented folks that wanted to help from being able to do that. And eventually some pieces were figured out, like it was a process. But I think in other neighborhoods, they may have been, with those resources, that would have been a lot easier. So either, and same thing when there were suicides, like in some of the tall buildings, there's an incident thing through Rideau-Rockcliffe, but that's not the same as like providing support to folks. And so in that same vein, one thing I remember in the pandemic when we did like the Overbrook Cares thing, one thing that became very obvious is that people needed supportive housing, not affordable housing, yes, at the bare minimum, but supportive housing. Like there's a huge lack of support and social workers to reach out to folks. And there's some tools here and there, of course, but overall that theme came back. And like, neighbors ended up acting as social workers, which in a way is not bad. I think that's actually really great for the neighborhood. But at the same time, if we happen, or there are lots of people I'm sure we did not reach through that piece. And so that was another kind of realization. And it's always a concern to me that downtown neighborhoods, like in terms of funding for parks, it always feels at least like we get the bad end of the stick because our parks already exist, and like the renewal budgets are not as shiny as the new park budgets. And so our parks always look a bit more derelict. This is, again, something that we've mentioned before, but just social spaces. And I guess the overall concern that there will be densification in Overbrook, which is a logical thing that, in theoretically, I agree with. But there is a concern that we're not preparing our neighborhood to actually have the services and the spaces, the social spaces, et cetera, to actually be ready for all of those wonderful people who will potentially be joining our neighborhood being Overbrook in my case, in the next few years. That's it.
No, we appreciate all those comments, and all those items are definitely enumerated on our list in terms of what we're seeking. We would definitely agree with you around the Overbrook scenario with the fire in Pressland. I think the good news is that we're going to start having some detailed conversations, not just with the city and colleagues, but also with other communities about resiliency. But I think the problem, and I think we had a bit of a short discussion about this at one point, is that the provincial legislation, especially around emergency management, is focused on resiliency of communities. But how much resiliency can you have if every day is a challenge, right? And so I think that we need to have a real discussion with the Emergency Protective Services Committee. And I actually will have a discussion with the chair about this, about the need for assistance for high priority neighborhoods where resiliency is a challenge because the self-sufficiency isn't there on a day-to-day basis. So I would agree with that. And I think we should also leverage excellent models that we saw with Ottawa Cares, with all the community associations in Ward 13 coming together during the pandemic to provide assistance to people. I think that there are continuing initiatives and interested organizations that are working on really emergency assistance. We would agree with you as well with the challenge around renewal dollars versus growth dollars. So, you know, we see a lot of degradation of park infrastructure within the core. And we really need to address that and refresh that. And I think we have to have a very serious conversation as to how we do that if we do see neighborhoods experiencing greater densification. Because if they do experience greater densification, we have a corridor as example in Overbrook on Coventry that will see a new park by virtue of new development. But what about you know, potential OCH lands that also could potentially densify during redevelopment? We need to ensure that there's adequate green space. As for resources in the community, we also fully agree with you around the allocation of more health services. Of course, that sometimes falls, well, it does fall under the guise of the Ministry of Health, but we continue to advocate and we'll continue to have discussions with the Montfort Hospital about the potential for a community health and resource center. That occurred with one of my previous colleagues, Councillor Fleury, and myself, where that has to actually be approved by the ministry and sponsored by a hospital. So, you know, there's a double challenge there. But we're happy to pick up that mantle again, and I'm actively doing that with Councillor Plante. You know, we are having a discussion. In fact, the Mayor has a task force about retention and recruitment of primary care physicians and others, and we've been serving on that, and we're interested, obviously, ensuring that we bring as many new resources as possible, despite the fact that that's kind of outside of the scope of council, but it doesn't mean that we can't advocate strongly for that, and we continue to do that. When doctors come to us and say, you know, they need space, or they want letters of recommendation to establish, enhance their practices, and that requires approval because of strange geographic rules that the Ministry of Health has, we write those letters, and we advocate, and we talk all the time. So I just want you to know that on all the files that you actually enumerated, we're attempting to do work. The pace isn't at the scope and scale that I want it to be in terms of achieving change, but we are advocating every day on a lot of these files. So we just want you to know that. So I see the next hand. Let's go to the next hand that's raised.
Okay, thank you so much for the deliberations. I want to comment. I'm happy that you've talked about the issue of transit. Personally, you know, I work for $16 per hour, and I have to use an Uber, you know, that costs $18, and it doesn't make sense for me because I'm waiting for the bus and it's not coming, and I have, you know, to really go to work early. And I wanted to really bring to your attention the issue of post-education services in our ward. You know, Vanier and, you know, the neighboring communities are kind of cheap. That's why, you know, there are a lot of newcomers to Canada that, you know, really settle there. And I'm part of this group where you really want to maybe go for French classes or for English classes. So it is fully booked. You cannot really attend to anything. The international students themselves, you know, have to spend time waiting for their papers and everything. And then there is no any programs that regarding, you know, to post-education services or anything. So I don't know if this can be included as a priority, because I work with a number of young people, the newcomers to Canada, and these are the things that they really point out. And I request that they can be invited to such engagements, and, you know, they voice out their concerns. And yeah, but thank you so much.
No, I appreciate that comment. And on Wednesday, we're actually going to hold a budget consultation focused on equity. So primarily for the Black, Indigenous, and racialized community. And one of the areas of focus is service for newcomers. And so we know that there's an inadequacy there, that we have to improve settlement services and access to education for newcomers. Because we know that there's sometimes a bit of a skill gap. Often, frankly, the skills are actually quite high, but it's the Canadian experience that's a requirement, and that's a necessity. And so we want to ensure that those educational tools are provided. We do that in partnership with senior levels of government, so both the province and the federal government. But those are areas that we have heard very clearly that people want the tools so that they can really kind of climb the economic ladder, make more dollars, and ascend quickly into a better situation. So we hear you on that, and we're actually going to have, I think, a bit more discussion about that on Wednesday. And I also want to note that I know Sophia Jacob is on the call. I know she's between two calls right now, but she works on a contractual basis with my office around equity relations and concerns. And I also want you to know that we do have a ACB youth table that she convenes on a regular basis to talk about the challenges, the gaps in terms of services for newcomers and others, and the investments that are required. So these are things that we are monitoring. She actually convenes a table of social service providers to talk about where they should focus to ensure that there are better investments and better results for newcomers. And she provides my office with reports and where we can be helpful in terms of advocacy for greater services. We will do that. On that consultation on Wednesday as well, we'll be noting all of these ideas. My office is also working with a consultancy called Quake Lab, who is going to undertake a report about the gaps in terms of service offerings for newcomers, for immigrants, for the racialized African, Caribbean, and Black community as well. So we are going to be working on a report to identify some of the quantitative gaps, the funding challenges that need to be addressed in our neighborhoods. And the idea, of course, is to take that back to city staff, to our community social services, so that they have a sense of the gaps that need to be addressed. But I just want you to know that we are working on all those issues. We are very aware from all the calls and the correspondence that we have in terms of the diverse communities on these challenges, and we really want to not just list these challenges and talk about the challenges. We want to now start seeing action and investment to address the challenges. And right now, I don't see any other hands up. Oh, Natalie has raised her hand. Oh,
it's actually me. It's actually me, sir.
That's great.
Rawlson.
Good to see you.
I've changed. I changed my look. No, good to see you. Good to see everyone. Thank you, Natalie, for forwarding to me the invite. I had put my name down to attend, but I couldn't find the email. I'm sorry about that. So I'll lower my hand. Just, I was wondering if you could maybe talk about, my perennial bugbear, and that's the sidewalks. But more importantly, I think you had mentioned, it's related to the budget. You'd mentioned that things don't get fixed because how the policies are set up currently. That we have to wait until roads are redone, until proper repairs can be done to sidewalks. I'm wondering if you could maybe talk about that, if that's moving forward, if we're having some, if that's going to be changing anytime soon, that policy, if you've been able to make any headway. Another question I have is, I'm a public servant in the federal public service. There's often lapses of money in divisions, directorates, branches. I'm wondering, I don't know if you can answer this or maybe somebody from the city, how much money is actually lapsed, like is not spent through programs, be it roads or social services or what have you, every year, and what happens with that money? Because I presume that not every penny is spent, and then what happens with that money?
Yeah, so I might let Isabel chime in after my answer to your second question. But I do know it's a very kind of complex system, because often most dollars are accounted for, and we're also mandated in the way that we do our spending, and even the way we undertake our capital reserves. So sometimes money might not be spent, but the money that goes into accounts for future capital improvement and maintenance. So it's a very kind of complex system. I would say, frankly, from my observation, but Isabel could correct me, in terms of administration, often, we're leaner than people think, despite the fact that there's a large number of people at the city providing services to a city of 1 million people. But I think that it feels like there's a complexity in terms of the way that dollars do flow in. Often, when you go line by line, you do see that some dollars are spent, some dollars are not spent. But often I find that the range is really kind of minimal in terms of what has been allocated and what has been spent in terms of the gap. So I think the city actually does a good job in terms of ascertaining the needs. But since you weren't on the call before, we were having a discussion about the budget direction to 2.5%. And the mayor was very clear, the new mayor was very clear that if there are dollars that are not necessary in terms of kind of that arbitrary 2.5% increase, that there is the potential to shift the dollars to other areas. And I would be inclined, as an example, with infrastructure, if we find dollars that could be shifted to grow infrastructure budget so that we could do more sidewalk repair, of course, we would attempt to do that. So my understanding is that there could be some flexibility. The question is, will that flexibility be, and I figure it most likely will still be within, I don't want to call it a silo, but within the committee structure. So, if we're looking at public works, and we see that there might be money in a different portfolio, there could be the potential of moving, that 1% that isn't spent to another area. But that's the nuance that we'll need to exercise as we looked at the budget. But I'll ask the expert Isabel to chime in here.
Yeah, I'm not sure I caught the beginning of the question. So it was, if we get funding from other levels of government, do we let some of it lapse in some cases?
No, I think it's a question of if there are dollars that aren't spent in a project or a portfolio, okay, if those dollars can be, in a sense, liberated and placed elsewhere.
So we approve each capital project with budget authority. If the dollars aren't fully spent, they are returned, what we say, return to source. And so if that project was funded by, let's say it's a transit project and transit tax, then it would be returned to the transit reserve. And so there are reserves money is returned to those reserves, or let's say it was funded by debt, then that debt authority is returned. And so we don't actually end up issuing that debt. So a lot of our capital projects in particular are either funded by gas tax, debt, or tax. And when we don't spend all those funds, it's returned to those reserves. And then reserves are available for primarily one-time projects to help to fund emergency situations or to fund future projects.
And often in certain areas, I know, like I sit on environment and climate change committee. Some of the reserves around, example, water infrastructure are actually mandated. So there's certain reserves as well where we have to keep certain dollars to ensure that we are able to undertake life cycle maintenance, etc. So that's what I meant with there being a bit of complexity. But I think in terms of this budget, there is an interest by councillors to see if there can be reallocation where possible of dollars. And so the mayor is open to that where it's permissible. And your second question, I think, was around your first question was around sidewalks and that type of infrastructure. Because I know that's been an ongoing challenge. Of course, we're going to continue to advocate for more investments. At the top of the of this session, I had said there was a reason why I was not, I didn't vote for the 2.5% budget direction. It's not because as a councillor, I think that we can really kind of explode your taxes. I'm not interested in that. But as you might know, I joke with people, we don't want the streets paved with gold or Beechwood paved with gold. We'd just be happy with good old asphalt in the right places, right? And that's also a challenge. But to be frank, I'm always going to continue to advocate for more of those dollars. And I think that, it is a challenge. We do see the state of repair for a lot of our roads and our sidewalks are not good. It's not just a challenge for, regular, I shouldn't say regular, but able-bodied people. We see that as a challenge with people with accessibility challenges. Even getting us back to a state where accessibility legislation would want us is a challenge in and of itself. And, the plan would take many years, and that's challenging. And that's one of the reasons why, at least on the Beechwood corridor, we're going to continue to advocate with staff for a more holistic policy change. As we're going to seek changes to the transportation master plan to decouple restoration and investment in that corridor from integrated water sewer work and decouple it so that it can be undertaken in a more holistic fashion. And I think the good news here, and this is a bit of good news, that as an idea, the economic development planning infrastructure department was asking us what we would like to see, and they got excited by that idea, and it's been added to a list. And I think that that's actually quite a good thing. So they understand that the community wants this. Community is united in it, and I think that's the fastest way. In the interim, however, we'll continue to advocate for the repairs that are necessary to ideally keep the road safe. And I know that there is some back and forth with the VCA, yourself and staff, and we're linked in on that. And we want to ensure that those repairs are undertaken. But I think that they're minimal. What we want to do is ensure that there's that maximal investment in the street in terms of an ultimate repair. With a open design, in a sense, process that's a very public one that would be reflective to public input. And I don't know if there might have been some questions in the chat. So I'm just looking at the chat. And I think Danica had a question. I filled out a survey, but I forget if we asked identifying questions such as if the person was a homeowner, their salary, etc. We actually didn't go into that level of detail. We wanted to keep it simple so that people could ask questions. This year, I didn't opt with my colleagues to do a budget consultation with renters, but we actually did that in the last term, and I think that might actually be an interesting scenario to examine in the future. So we do know and note that about 50%, I think it was the last count, 48% of people living in Rideau-Rockcliffe rent. So that's a high proportion. And we want to ensure that we listen to all voices, because even if you're not getting a direct tax bill, you are paying those services indirectly, whether it's through your rent or service fees that you might utilize when you utilize recreational services, etc. So we want to hear from everyone. And I don't know if there are any other questions. I'm just looking through the chat. And I don't see any other questions in the chat. So at this time, I think we have 8 minutes left. So are there any other outstanding questions that anybody might have for us? Seeing none, I just want to really thank everyone for their participation on this call. I want to remind everyone that the budget is an ongoing process. So despite the fact that we deliberate it 1 month each year, usually each November, and we do it twice as a new term starts in terms of a transitional budget. I want to remind everybody that budget making is a continual process because every ask costs money. And so every priority requires usually some spending. So we want to have a sense of where your priorities are. And this consultation helps us do that, to get a sense of what community members want to see. It's a continuing process, so we do invite you to provide us with written comments. If you have specific concerns that you want us to address, please feel free to email our office at Rideau-Rockcliffe Ward at ottawa.ca. And we'll happily take receipt of those emails, and they will feed into the questions that we will pose to city staff to when we're looking at the budget and analyzing all of the budget lines, as well as when we're talking to the mayor and our colleagues in terms of advocacy. It's also important for you to read the budget. It will go live on the ottawa.ca website November 8th. So everybody, it's definitely a public document. City staff is working hard to make it a more accessible document this time round, with more information that would be user friendly and explanatory. So we want you to take advantage of that. And we also want you to take advantage of the potential of delegating before a committee if you were so exercised. If there are areas of investment that you'd like to advocate for, or areas of savings even that you would want to ask for, the process allows you to register as a delegate at the committee, individual committee meetings that would be dealing with the individual budgets. And then they all eventually rise to council for full deliberation and for approval. So we invite you to continue to be involved in that process. And we also remind you that on Wednesday at 6:30, this Wednesday, we are also having an additional consultation primarily for the Black, Indigenous, and racialized communities, but anybody can participate, anybody can tune in, or come to the session that will be held at the Black Business Hub on Montreal Road. So I really want to just thank you for taking some important time out of your evening to spend with us, to provide us with inputs. And we continually look forward to more input from everybody around this table, and hopefully even more people during the budget process. So thank you so much, everybody. Oh, can't hear you, Natalie.
Sorry. Thank you very much. Appreciate you listening and doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, if we can find other opportunities in the future, whether it's with renters, we like innovation, and we also like listening to people before the budget is tabled. I think that's kind of as you had noted,
obviously
2.5%.
But I think the rental thing is important as well, because I don't think renters understand that one of the reasons why a landlord wants or needs to raise the rent is to cover the extra cost of property taxes that keep going up. So even though they don't pay directly, you're right, they are paying.
Yes. They absolutely pay for services, and like I said as well, user fees that they might use for recreational services or other services.
Or the bus.
Absolutely, the transit fares, etc. So it is actually quite important. Everybody pays taxes, and everybody has a right to participate in this process. So I'm really thankful that people have turned out, and we'll continue the process throughout the month.
All right, thanks. See you soon. Cheers. Bye.
Take care.